Honorable Minister, Shri Saugata Roy, Shri MP Narayan, Mr. Ravi Gupta, my fellow colleagues on the dais, and distinguished guests. As was flagged by the preceding speakers, I think the whole theme of urbanization and how India is going to address this key challenge going forward is occupying center stage for several reasons. First of all, there is an increasing recognition that with 90% of tax revenues coming from our urban areas, 70 to 75% of incremental GDP coming from these areas, and almost 70% of employment coming from the urban areas. Clearly, the pace and model of urbanization that India adopts is going to be a critical determinant of the next foreseeable years. Clearly, India is seeing an unprecedented wave of urbanization. And even though we all know that this is somewhat modest, the rate of urbanization is modest compared to other countries. If you look at the sheer numbers, next to China, India is the only country in the world which is going to see this kind of growth. Unfortunately, urbanization has been a somewhat neglected area in our overall governance paradigm. And many of the deficits that we see today are not something that happened accidentally or within the last few years alone. It's been the cumulative effect of the whole urban paradigm that we have been following. Just yesterday, there was a meeting of the subcommittee of the National Development Council, the first meeting of this subcommittee, which has been constituted exclusively to look at what should be our approach towards issues of urbanization, and more immediately, what should our new JNNURM, the Urban Renewal Mission, which is a very ambitious initiative that was launched 5 years ago and is now set for its second avatar starting from the end of next year. What should JNNURM look like? Now, JNNURM 1 was the first serious engagement at the Government of India level with the issues of urbanization. We managed to achieve quite a bit. It certainly brought to the center stage the need for reform. And across the country, we have seen that several cities and states have enthusiastically gone ahead with the reform agenda. There are a middling set of cities and states which have not been able to do as much, but have still, done their bit. And there is a third set of states where really the reform agenda is yet to begin in a serious manner. Yesterday's deliberations mentioned that going forward, we have 3 key deficits while we look at the issues of urbanization. There is first and foremost a huge infrastructure deficit. There is secondly a capacity building and institutional deficit. And thirdly, there is a governance deficit. And we need to be able to address all these 3 on a war footing, because these issues are acquiring an urgency which really cannot be put aside any longer. Mr. Saugata Roy, the minister, was mentioning that along with this relook at the JNNURM, the government is also simultaneously embarking on a new initiative, a very ambitious initiative, which is named after the former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. It's called the Rajiv Awaz Yojana. And this is envisaged as a standalone, dedicated program which will address as its exclusive focus the issues of slums and housing across the Indian cities. When I said standalone, I did not mean that this will in any way attempt to look at the issues of housing or slums outside the overall urban paradigm. All that I was trying to indicate here was that Government of India feels this is an important enough issue to merit a program of an equivalent size as the JNNURM to deal with the issues of housing and the development of slums across India. There is also an increasing realization that countries the world over have found that housing is a huge growth multiplier. If you look at post-war reconstruction in Europe, for example, you look at the US, boom, economic boom, a lot of it has had much to do with the importance and the role of housing as a huge economic activity that is capable of generating income, employment, and other empowerment benefits for the citizens. So under the Rajiv Awaz Yojana, there's going to be a huge focus on the housing sector and to see how the potential that housing offers as a growth catalyst can be actually harnessed. When I mentioned earlier about the three deficits, there is an increasing realization that across the board, to address all these three key deficits that we spoke about, the starting point has to be reform. There has to be reform of institutions. There has to be reform of the planning models, approaches, strategies, paradigms, whatever you may call it, because currently our planning approaches do not really take into account the kind of realities that we have on ground. And while many plans have been ideal on paper, the gap between the plan and what has been achieved on ground, or the implementation of those